Hello friends, today we have another story from the No Sleep subreddit. And, as always, you can find the original author and story down below. Now, with that being said, please like, comment, and subscribe. And enjoy today's video. I know all of you like to tell your scary stories. I like them too. Way back when my voice was still high-pitched, I knew a man who told the scariest stories you'd ever hear. Well, he wasn't a human exactly, but he sure was a man, a good man by my estimation. But you can be the judge of that. See, my mama used to live way down in the rural bits of Texas. Ain't nothing much down there, besides toads and mosquitoes. Fireflies would light up the night sky, and once in a while, you'd see a couple of eyes coming up from the water. We lived in a small house, a bedroom, a kitchen. Nothing special, but nothing shameful neither. It was just me and Mama. Papa left a long time ago. Mama says he was out on the lake and got eaten by one of them gators. I believed it. He was always drunk and on a tear. He'd go out in the reeds until he got as high as his head, and he was a big fella too. That man go out there and throw meat to the alligators, meat my mama said we couldn't afford, and he'd come back scratching from the mosquitoes and what else was in those high reeds. He'd stumble into the house and fall asleep somewhere round the door. None of that seems wholly pertinent, but it will be. Just give it some time. I was outside one evening. Mama was asleep. Mama was a hard sleeper. I think she grew up by the train track. Chicago, she said. Mama was a city girl that came out to the country to raise a big family. It was just me, though. I never asked why, but it was always just me. It was a gorgeous evening, the ones you see in those little photo booklets that advertise how beautiful the town is. Fireflies dotted the sky, and a big yellow moon lit up the whole way down the lake. As much as a lake as you could call it. The critters sure did like the water. Bugs, frogs, gators, big and little fish. You could stick a net in the water and be sure something would be stuck in there. So, I walked through the reeds, taking little chunks off the ones nearest to me so I could find my way back. It was just a straight walk, but you try walking in a straight line when you're blind, you'll end up in a circle. I think that's why they say we have a circulatory system. As I'm just near the water, pulling the reeds and swatting mosquitoes, I see a kid with a lantern, about my height. The lantern was half the size of his body, big flame in the middle of the glass. The orange waves danced and flickered, lighting everything it touched, and casting shadows where it didn't. The kid beckoned me to him. "Hey, come here," he said. Well, it wasn't a kid. It was a very adult voice. Little person, I thought. That's what they'd like to be called. Just the same, I didn't feel too comfortable approaching a man I didn't know. "Come here. It's all right." And he beckoned again. Something about him seemed familiar. I didn't need much convincing. I headed over to him, and he gestured with his hand for me to sit. I sat, and he sat beside me. Wasn't much of a man either. He had bulbous yellow eyes that searched around and never found anything, big lips, red splotches just about everywhere. He was fat too. Well, not quite fat, but somehow inflated. He was barefoot and smelled like old hamburgers. I breathed through my mouth and waited for him to speak again. "I've got to tell you about a story about the house you're living in," he said. He paused, just waiting for it to sink in. Somewhere I was living. Now, I loved my house. I loved my mama. But there weren't nothing worth telling a story about there. And everyone in town knew about Papa, so it couldn't be that. "Just me and my mama here," I replied, shifting a bit on the dirt, as a small tide lapped close to my sneakers, the shadows from the lantern playing on the water. I had my eyes fixed on the water, always expecting a couple of eyes and a big alligator mouth. "Just hold on there. I've been around this place a long time. I might know something you don't." He waited again, his eyes whirling, and his hands shuffling around the dirt, like he was looking for something on the other side. "Okay, go ahead then. There's a woman in the house, sometimes thin, sometimes big, sleeps heavy, Talks about trains in Chicago. That's my mama. It is? Yes, sir. She good to you? I hesitated. Mama was good. She was rough sometimes. Sometimes she'd get sick and, well, irrational. She'd yell about how people in the house were trying to talk to her, wanted to get to her. Eventually she'd tire herself out, and she was a sweet mother then. Cooked the best beef stew you ever had. I never had any other beef stews, but hers was real good all the same. Yeah, she's good, I said. The little man waited again, then continued on. Well, maybe I'm talking about another woman. I couldn't know. Your mama seems a wonderful gal. Tell me the story, I said. My fingers tapped on the ground, along the dancing shadows, under the big yellow moon. I could hear the plop of fish flying out of the water and right back in. That siren eek of mosquitoes came by my ear, and I shooed it away. And I looked at the water. Where it was lit by the flame, I could still see the little man, his eyes still whirling, his hands still digging. Well, some woman lived in that house, and she had a husband, handsome fellow, maybe a little too hard on the bottle, but he got it done what needed to be done. For years the two of them would talk about having kids, and it just never happened. Well, almost never. Don't worry, I'll get to that. Now, I won't go too into the details because you're so young, but boy did these two try, and sometimes, like women do when they're ready to become mamas. She get nice and big, then she get thin again. Now, her husband was confused to say the very least. His wife would cry, say that the child was taken by the Lord, and then they continue on about their lives, alone in that little house by the lake. But funny enough how God works. Like a miracle, when they're at their saddest, plenty would come in. See, the woman had a sister from the city who would send her a big package full of meat, and she'd make that meat into a nice stew. Sometimes they even had a little extra. You know what they would do with it? I paused. I knew. I heard the stories. He'd go and throw it to the alligators. You're right. He'd throw it right to the alligators. Now, I don't know if gators can taste spice, but if they can, they're mighty tough. That stew was always filled with habaneros and all sorts of chilies, something you gotta stop and sweat for every few bites. Not those gators, though. It gobbled them right up. I tell you, though, one day those two did have a child. Handsome one, too. Fuzzy brown hair, and cute as all get out. Looks something like you. Matter of fact, named him Matthew. My name is Matthew. I knew what was going on. I did. I felt something like fear and something like comfort, knowing just who this man was saying he was. Is it? Well, that can hardly be a coincidence. I'll tell you something though, Matthew. I lied earlier in the story. I suppose I should go ahead and tell you the truth. What's that? Well, you already figured it out. Wasn't too hard. That's your mama I'm talking about. And yes, I'm your papa. I'm sure you figured that out too. I know I don't look like much, not after you know what happened, but I didn't die. I've been living around this here lake since you were born. Your mama says she don't want me back in the house on account of how I look. I don't blame her, but it sure is frustrating. There was some rustling in the reeds behind us, and the croak with some old frogs. They always sounded old, to me at least. And that meat ain't no package from Chicago. I don't think Carol ever lived in Chicago. Maybe she did, but I never heard from anyone there, and there wasn't so much as a picture to prove it. Those was the little miracles from the Lord. Yes, I put one in your mama, and we'd wait a few months, and we'd have ourselves a nice meal. The first one really was a miscarriage, and we were hungry, so we tried just a bite. Maybe we were both a little bit too much on the whiskey, but we were very hungry, and boy, it tasted good. Best meal I ever had. And as long as I could keep fishing by that lake, I could give your mama the energy she needed to make that delicious beef stew. I got up as fast as I could muster. I tried to run, took a few good strides, and then I felt arms on my shoulders, locking me in place and shoving me down on the floor. I squirmed and screamed, "Let me go! No!" I cried and I hollered. It was no use. It was my mama. She straddled me with her legs and pinned my arms down so I couldn't move a muscle. She smelled like those old hamburgers, and she smiled that sweet smile she always smiled when she was one of her better moods. We waited a bit longer with you,
Wanted you to be nice and ripe, and now I think you're ready. Don't you think he's nice and ready, Carol? Mama took one hand off of me and whipped it behind her back and pulled out a big kitchen knife. She held it in front of me, and I could see my eyes in the metal. Tears were rolling, my face was red and screaming. Can't say I've been that scared since. Carol, darling, before we make our meal, how about we kiss like we used to? It'd be nice for him to see what a happy family looks like. Kiss you? Mama spat. You ugly little drunk. Not even the alligators will want to kiss your mouth. Last one tried to kiss you, spat you right out. I ain't want nothing to do with that. Darling, I missed you. I don't miss you. I ain't letting you back in the house neither. You think I can't find another man? Just past this lake, I've got 100 suitors just waiting to take a gal like me. But they have big cocks too. Not like your little pecker. That was enough for Papa. He ran right towards Mama. I don't know how he did it with those whirling eyes, but he did it. He came and pushed Mama right off of me. I started crawling away as quickly as I could. Papa bit her on the arm and Mama let out a big yelp. Fuck! She screamed. Mama didn't cuss much, unless she was real mad. And boy, was she real mad. I crawled into the reeds and hid there, looking through to see what was going to happen. She stabbed him, right in his arm, when he tried to block her from his stomach. Big nasty gash. Blood running everywhere, a little brown, a little green, but still mostly red. But he kept just kicking and biting. I'll kill you, she screamed and slashed, and they both yelped and hollered. Then I swear, he started humming a little tune. It sounded like a nursery rhyme, and the water started to bubble, and I saw 2 big eyes out of the water, and then that mouth, and a big gator came right up, whapping his tail, snorting and groaning, in the way gators do. Bit Mama on the leg, and started dragging her back to the water. Mama screamed and kicked, but that gator hung on. Bit up to her thigh, and she was bleeding. Strips of meat and bone cracked and split. That gator dragged Mama right down into the water. There was some splashing, and the gator's back would come up and then back down into the water, and occasionally I'd hear a gurgled scream. Before I knew it, the whole thing was over. My papa sat there, I have to say. Even then I felt a bit bad for him. Son, come out of those reeds. I promise I ain't gonna eat you no more. I came out and sat by Papa, and Papa started humming again. I started to get up, but he put his hand on me. Don't worry, she ain't gonna hurt you. I just gotta go away for a while. The alligator came back on the land, and Papa sat right down on her back. She crawled into the water until just her back and his upper body were above the water. I gotta go, son. I'm sorry. One day we might see each other again. I didn't say a word. What was there to say? I met my papa, and he tried to eat me. Now he wasn't, and now he was riding on the alligator. So I just nodded, and secretly hoped that maybe I wouldn't see him again. And then, off he went, across the lake, until I couldn't see him no more. Haven't seen him since either. I went back to the house, and I'd tell you, I heard those voices my mama used to hear. But they wasn't mad at all. They were saying thank you. I think those were my brothers and my sisters. And I think they thought I did something right. I whispered, don't thank me, thank Papa. He saved us after all. And then, I tell you, nobody ever heard those voices again. Well, friends, that's the end of today's video. Now, you may have noticed I made a slight tone shift in this story. Now, I'm aware that some of the more popular videos on my channel are those of a disturbing nature, and some of you preferred my narration style of the story about the pram. And, going forward, I'm going to try to combine those two as often as I can, because, as I can see it, other narrators have a similar style, and I don't want to be other narrators. So, as often as I can, I'll incorporate a more dramatized telling to all stories. And with that being said, I am Crafty the Teller, your humble narrator. And as always, have a good night.